Tell me f4 is not enough. Tell me f4 cannot be cinematic. Tell me f4 is slow. Tell me there is not enough bokeh. Tell me it's boring. Tell me it lacks character. Tell me it looks like shot on an iPhone. Tell me you need an f1.4 prime lens to get a beautiful image. Tell me composition and lighting don't matter, a fast lens does. Tell me f4 is not the most popular aperture in feature films. Tell me you cannot get a great shot on a zoom lens. Tell me you only need G-Master lenses. Tell me gear matters more than skills. Tell me experience and talent are overrated. Tell me you don't need to see the background, just obliterating it in bokeh balls is the right way to film. Tell me pros don't use f4 lenses. Tell me you can't film an entire wedding with it. Tell me f4 gives you no volume. Tell me it wasn't cinematic. This is the most underrated Sony lens, 20-70 f4G. This video is not a classic review of this lens, so I will not show you some charts like chromatic aberration tests, etc. It's pretty boring because I've been using this lens for more than a year, constantly, almost daily, and that is why I'm showing a ton of footage with this lens, and I did test it in a lot of different circumstances like real estate filmmaking, like reportage style filmmaking, macro filmmaking. Almost all the shots in my studio are shot with this lens, where I show you some products because it's very handy to have a zoom lens when you do such work. So all in all, I'm very satisfied with this lens, and the first thing that impressed me the most is the range of focal length. So you have the 20 right here and the 70 here, and guys, 20 is the widest focal length I have, and it's plenty for me, because even for real estate it's more than enough. When you shoot real estate at 16mm wide or 14mm wide full frame equivalent, you do see a distortion, and it's not as precise, as fancy as it could be, because I use mostly like 35mm for the real estate and 20mm only to showcase something like a chandelier hanging from the ceiling, to just showcase the the epicness of the moment. So 20mm is more than fine for me as my widest focal length, and I don't need wider, and 70mm is very handy, especially when you're doing something like a reportage style shoot. You have a 20, you have a 70, I can balance it on a tiny gimbal and still get amazing shots. And of course guys, I did test and use other zoom lenses like 24mm or 28mm on the wide end, and they can be pretty limiting to myself, and I think for you guys as well. So 20mm on the wide end is just a must-have in my opinion. The 20-70 f4 does have outstanding sharpness. I've been showing you some footage from this lens, and as you can tell, it's pretty sharp wide open. At f4, of course, it will be sharp, and it also has pretty good contrast as well. So whenever I take a shot with this lens, it looks 3D, let me say. The bokeh is also very nice, and the pop is right there. And as you can tell from the video I showed you in the beginning, I don't care about the f4. One more very important factor is that the image stabilization or IBIS is working better with the native Sony lenses. I did test, for example, the Sigma 24-70 f2.8 lens, compared it to the G-Master lens, for example, and it had much worse stability, let me say, because image stabilization in Sony cameras is doing its best job with the native lenses, and it's doing not okay with the third-party lenses. It's a pain in the ass, to be honest, but it is what it is, and that is why I would prefer using the zoom lens from Sony, because on the prime lens you can set the focal length of your IBIS manually, like 55mm prime lens, you just set it to 55 and you get better results. But if you have a zoom lens, you won't be switching it ever so slightly when you go from 20 to 25 to 35 to 50. No way. So for zoom lens, I would say that the Sony is an option number one. And a few words about the bokeh of this lens. Even at 20mm and f4, you still get pretty nice bokeh when you stand pretty close to the lens, but when you get to 70mm at f4, you still get a lot of background separation and blur, and the quality of the bokeh is a bit funky. In my opinion, it's not like buttery smooth, but still it's more than fine, and as you saw from the real world examples, there is enough of bokeh and the quality is very nice. But guys, this lens is not perfect, because when you shoot raw photos or raw video, you get a pretty strong barrel distortion at the widest end, and you even get some black corners, just completely black corners, which is not perfect, not ideal. If you want to do like a quick shot in RAW and you don't want to edit it, you will have to edit it anyways, because the distortion is very huge and the vignette is pretty strong as well. This lens is super compact and lightweight, and that is why Sony lays onto the digital corrections, let me say, and that is why you get those distortions at the wide end shooting in RAW. But when you shoot video in normal mode or JPEGs, the lines are very much straight, so you have no issues whatsoever when you use JPEGs or video mode. And this lens doesn't have any major issues with chromatic aberrations. Of course, it's an f4 lens, and most of the lenses, they don't have like crazy chromatic aberrations at f4, but still it's worth noticing. One more very important benefit for videographers, and I do consider this lens to be more of a videographer's lens because of the distortion issue in RAW photos, as I said above. So this lens almost doesn't have focus breathing, no matter when you use 70mm or 20mm, and even if you enable the focus breathing compensation function in your camera, the focal length almost doesn't change. That is why this lens almost doesn't have focus breathing, and it's very good for filmmakers. And the autofocus performance is of course stunning. I've been using this lens mostly outdoors with the 1:5 stops Nisi ND filter, and it had no issues focusing through the ND filter. Also, you can rotate the focus ring to adjust the focus even in the autofocus mode a bit. So if you have a person on the front and you have a person on the back, if the camera didn't decide right for yourself, you can just turn the focus ring and it'll slowly switch to another person, which is very handy in the reportage style shooting. And all in all, autofocus being just flawless, super fast, very reliable. This lens actually replaces 3 different lenses in my kit. First of all, the 24-70, that's okay, obvious. Then we have the ultra-wide lens, so I don't need like a 16-35 lens. And also I don't need a macro lens, because with this 20-70 at 70mm, you have only 0.25 meters of minimum focusing distance, and it is very, very close, almost macro-like. And I don't need simply a macro lens for my particular use cases, for being a YouTuber, doing some almost macro shots of different lenses, etc. So it replaces 3 lenses at once. And of course, guys, it is a compact and lightweight lens. It's slightly over 500 grams, and when you zoom in, you do get this barrel extension, but to me, it's okay. And I don't have any like dust inside of the elements, and it does have weather sealing and weather protection, so it's not an issue. And I've been using it with my Sony ZV-e1, so the whole entire kit of the camera and lens combination is less than 1 kilogram. Or slightly above 1 kilogram. Anyways, it's a very nice portable and lightweight lens. That is why I love it. And guys, the price of this lens is $1,100, and I think for 1,100 bucks, it's much more enjoyable and much more versatile and useful than the 24-70 f2.8 GM Mark II, because that lens is more than 2 times more expensive, and this lens gives you wider focal length on the wide end. Yes, it is 1 stop slower, but it's much more compact and a lot cheaper. So that is why I do consider this lens even better than the GM Mark II 24-70 bang for a buck. And guys, I'm sure you did enjoy the video in the very beginning with our wedding workshops. My wife does wedding workshops in Europe. It is called Piani Wedding Workshops. We have people from Australia, Canada, New York, New Jersey, a lot of guys from all over the world, like South Africa, etc. So if you are curious about elevating your video and photo portfolio, wedding portfolio, you are very welcome. We do workshops like many times a year in different places all over the world, mostly in Italy, and as you saw, it is just stunning. We are waiting for you on our workshops, and if you're curious, I'll be there as well, so we can talk, communicate, and have fun. And to conclude, guys, this is one of my favorite Sony lenses ever produced. and maybe it's right now my favorite lens to use. And I do have 2 videos about this lens. The first one is 24-70-ish lenses, 6 different lenses compared for full-frame Sony cameras. I'll leave a link down below. And right here I have a video of f2.8 versus f4 and why you need to pick an f4 probably, or an f2.8. So you can check this video right over there. If you did enjoy this particular video, smash the like and subscribe buttons and hit the notifications bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, bye.